all I can say is kind of my perspective on it and how things have perplexed me.
Yeah.
And I'd say certainly the fact that AIDS has become much more of a problem in sub-Saharan Africa compared to, for example, in the UK or Western Europe is something I don't quite understand. I think there's probably an accepted answer on it, and I think that medical statisticians or disease spread experts, these people would be able to offer up a much better explanation than what I could. But for me, considering promiscuity is as big an issue, or if not bigger, in the UK, which is supposed to be the primary source of spreading the disease, it lends the question, why is it not spread more in the UK? I really don't know, and I wouldn't like to say that I'm aware. I think that there's one answer or another, but it's a good question to ask, and I'd like to know the answer.
Are you familiar with the studies of sexual behaviour that have been conducted showing that Africans are less sexually promiscuous than Westerners?
Actually, I did read a few things like that, it was in a really good book about AIDS in Africa. I think it was called 28, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it was kind of one personal story for each of the 28 million people in sub-Saharan Africa are infected. And it did mention them. And a lot of the stigma, people will often think, oh, it's an African thing because they're having lots of sex, they use prostitutes, that type of thing. I think that's probably quite a common perception, and very arrogant and stupid. I think that's probably a fair perception that people have in the West anyway.
You acknowledge that the sexual behaviour among Britons is quite rampant in terms of promiscuity and unsafe sex.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. In my experience, I think that probably people in Britain are having a fair amount of unprotected sex. So the question is, why doesn't AIDS spread correspondingly? But I really don't know. And I think it's a tough question to ask. I mean, in our research, getting people to be open about their sexual practices is a nightmare.
You're familiar with the industries such as the sex tourism industry, the pornography industry. We also have a problem of paedophilia, prostitution, teenage pregnancies, STDs on the rise, and divorces after 2 years because of unfaithfulness. But is there any AIDS in Britain as far as you've come across in your lifetime?
I've not come across it in Britain. No, that's true. I'm sure it is there, and I'm aware that the disease is a problem in Britain. It's probably underestimated, if anything. But I think those issues which you mentioned before are not distinct to Britain. If you go to Japan, they've got similar problems: family breakdown, teenage pregnancies, underage sex. These are fairly common Western or developed nations, if you want to call them that, issues. Maybe it's to do with the falling. The fact that the power of religious institutions is falling and causing that. But I cannot explain why AIDS is less prevalent in one country to another. I think it's a big question. And I'd really like to know the statistics of the spread of disease. I think that's one of the key areas.
It's difficult to come across because there's not so much data collection being done. I'm just wondering why there's so much emphasis on teaching infants messages about HIV when most children in boarding schools especially, but even schools across the board, are malnourished. It's the country.
It's a big thing, because what we're also trying to do is say that HIV is one problem, but it's wrapped up in issues of poverty, it's wrapped up in issues of ghettoisation, all these types of things. And I think if you talk to people in the organisation, they'll say the same thing. It's for them, they've got starvation, poverty, poor sanitation, HIV. It's almost like another one on the list for them. And to say make it as a completely distinct issue is not correct, because it is wrapped up. But what we do is we're not educating infants, we're educating young people from the age that they are likely to become sexually active, so that they're aware of how they can avoid catching the disease. It's not infants, it is kind of from the age of in their teens is our target group.
With so much money being spent in fighting AIDS, and there are actually over 6,000 AIDS NGOs in Uganda, doesn't it seem possible that because so much money is being spent on fighting one problem, it's to the detriment of all other health issues?
Quite possibly. And I think that would be for the government or bigger organisations to take a strategic view on it. That's true. Yeah. I mean, but it's difficult to say to an NGO, look, we've got enough people in this area, why don't you work on this one? Yeah. That's true. But a more strategic view on it is probably important. And I don't know if the government here does that or not. But I think a strategy for combating all the social ills is necessary.
Considering so many people from the West coming to third world countries to fight this problem, what do you think the impact will be in the future if it's eventually announced that HIV is not the cause of AIDS?
I have no idea. I don't know about that announcement, but I wouldn't like to speculate about if such a thing is announced. How would that be? Because I don't know anything to that effect.
Yeah.
But lots of things can happen which undermine medical opinions.
Yeah.
The way people think about certain diseases, it always happens through history. People think one way about it and then it can change.
Yeah.
All you can do is go with what seems to be the best way of fighting it.
Yeah.
And everything suggests that HIV causes AIDS and leads to it. So that's what you've got
based
to work
on the
through.
tests, but the tests are non-specific. And at the same time, the medical literature actually serves as compelling evidence to show that AIDS isn't caused by
as I say,
HIV.
I've not read the medical literature
because of the studies of discordant couples.
Yeah, I couldn't comment on it. I really don't know the medical literature, so I'll do my best to read up on it.
A boot is a condom. Socks is my white blood cells. My foot is there. A body, human body. Now, I'm putting on my white blood cells. And the condom. I can juggle this ball without getting pain on my foot. I can do everything I want when I'm putting on this condom. But when I remove a condom and I remain with the white blood cells, I can easily get the HIV virus. I'm already have the virus. But the white blood cells, they can't stop me from getting the virus. The more I juggle this ball, the more my white blood cells get weak. Now one blood cell is dead. I'm remaining with one. Again, the next one is is dead. Now I have no white blood cells. At the end, I may find difficult to juggle this ball because my white blood cells are dead, and also I don't have condom. At the end, I'll see.
Excellent. Very good indeed. Everybody understand?
So that everything's stuck in there, stays in there, okay, and then throw it away. Okay, throw it in the toilet, bin, wherever you dispose of it. Anyone have a go? Do you want to demonstrate for me? Let's watch it. Who plays in goal for Manchester United? Van der Sar. Correct answer. Okay. Name England's goalkeeper. Robinson.
Who are the best team in England?
Chelsea.
No.